I really appreciate you guys being here today. We're going to get started in just a sec. If you are able to pop into the chat some of these things that I have listed here, that would be great. So I'm curious about where folks are joining us from, like where, I'm in South Florida. If you could tell me how old is your kiddo and what's one thing that you love about your child? And I will get us started in the chat with these things. But if you can share some of that so I can get to know a little bit about you, that would be really helpful. So you guys will hear about this in just a sec as we get started, but I have a 5 and an 8-year-old. And yeah, I'll wait to see what else you guys are entering in there in the chat. Everyone has access to the chat feature, just making sure. Okay, so I see, thank you for sharing, Rebecca, coming from Miami, and a nice age range there from 7 to 15. Oh gosh, okay. Also from Miami and an 11 and 10-year-olds. All right, so this is really helpful to me because as I go through the presentation, I want to make sure that what I am sharing with you is, relevant for your family or things that you can use in, just in your everyday life with your kiddos. I really want this to be something that's helpful to you. All right, anyone else want to share? And we're a small group, so definitely don't have to stay on mute. Definitely feel free to unmute yourself and just let us know some of these things about where you're coming from and how old your kiddos are. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. It's 4 minutes past 12:30, and then if other folks come in, they can join us. If you signed up via the newsletter, you saw that the webinar that we're doing today, it's going to be, I'm going to be sharing the recording with anyone who signed up. So just know that this is not going to be like circulated widely, but it is going to be to all of the folks who missed it live. They will be getting a recording of our session today. So I wanted to start off our afternoon, and I'm going to get you out of here at 1:30 on the dot. And if you need to duck out earlier, totally understandable. I know your time is really, really valuable. So what's our game plan for today? Let me adjust. I will start out by just saying that this is my first time hosting a webinar like on my own. I've done plenty of webinars where somebody else is taking care of tech and all the stuff, and I just show up as the presenter. So I'm a little bit like nervous about some of these things, but hopefully technology will be on our side today and everything will go smooth. So I want to just tell you a little bit about my story, about who I am and why I'm doing what I'm doing today and with Wise Mama Bears. We're going to then dive right into what are the tools that you can use to find your calm when your kids are really struggling with anxiety. And I've kind of grouped these tools into 2 big buckets. Tools for yourself and tools for talking to yourself, like how do you talk to yourself in these times, and also how do you talk to your child. I'm going to later tell you a little bit about the Wise Mama Bears coaching group. It's a group that's currently open for enrollment, and it'll be starting up very soon. And then I want to open it up for questions and answers. So anything that we talked about today in terms of implementing these tools with your kiddos, I want to give you a chance to definitely like get into the details and in the weeds of like, what are the things that you see that you might get stuck on, as in case I can help you troubleshoot. All right. So, quick disclaimer is that I am a psychologist, so I provide therapy in Florida. But this presentation, my tips, my newsletter, the things you see on my Instagram, those things are not therapy. I am not your therapist, and all of this information that I'm reviewing with you today is strictly educational and, just to be of help to you, but it's definitely not a psychological intervention or treatment. So a little quick note about me. I go by Ellie. My full name is Elizabeth, but it's a nickname I've had since I was a kid. Some people get confused, think it's Eli. Nope, it's Ellie. And I'm a licensed psychologist. My alma mater 3 times over is University of Miami. And so I don't know if we have any other Hurricanes fans, but I was there for a long time. I'm also, my most important job that I'm most proud of is I'm a mom of 2 little boys, Lucas and Marcelo. Oh, thank you for sharing, Benjamin, about your kids. Wow, you are a busy dad.
You bet.
Yeah, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wow, that is awesome and busy. So Lucas and Marcelo are 5 and 8. It's a very fun and busy season in life. They keep me on my toes at all times. And I also have a private practice here in South Florida. It's called Wellness in Broward, and I exclusively focus on helping children, adults, and families with anxiety and OCD treatment. I've recently started this new venture called Wise Mama Bears, where I'm providing coaching services outside of the therapy room. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that toward the end of today. So the topic of what we're talking about today is when our kiddo is experiencing a lot of angst, a lot of just strong, big emotions because they're feeling so nervous about something. What are the things that we can do to kind of calm down our own nervous system, our own emotions, so that we can be there for our kids to help them? So I thought the most logical place to start is to really just think about, what does our kid's storm look like? What are the things about that storm that might kind of trigger us? So a couple of things that usually we're going to notice when our kiddo is struggling in these ways is that they are engaging in a lot of avoidance related to their anxiety. So maybe they're saying like, oh, there's no way I'm going to go on that play date or to that pool party. You can't make me do those things. You know that that's too hard for me, whether it's going to a birthday party, whether it's, maybe they're really scared about throwing up or any kind of more like health anxiety related issues. And so there are certain things they feel they have to avoid in order to stay safe. The sky's the limit in terms of the kinds of things that kids can worry about, but what is the common thread is that they usually engage in some kind of avoidance. They don't want to do that thing that makes them uncomfortable. And then also seeking reassurance, right? What are the things that they're coming to you with during the storm to say, like, are you sure that so-and-so is going to be at that birthday party? That's going to make me feel okay if they're there. Or, how do you know that I'm not going to get food poisoning? Because look, there's like this little speck of something different on my sandwich. So maybe that means, this is going to make me throw up or, going to make me go to the bathroom. Maybe they're doing a lot of double checking, triple checking, etc., like checking things to make sure that it feels okay to them in terms of facing their fears or in terms of coping with whatever it is that causes that angst. And then, of course, all of this can come on top of the regular stuff that we are dealing with every day. Things like being really tired after not getting great sleep, being really hangry, too much screen time, sibling drama, like all the things that just can come about with everyday parenting life. And then on top of that, they're dealing with these other big emotions. So I wanted to just take a beat. Again, we're a small group here, so please feel free to unmute yourself and share a little bit. And if you're not comfortable with that, that's okay too. And if you want to pop some things in the chat, but I'm curious about what are some of the things in your child's anxiety storm? Like, what does that look like in your home? What are maybe some of the common triggers? What are the things that they say, things that you're seeing when they're struggling in this way? Anybody? Okay. Oh, go ahead.
So my 7-year-old doesn't like going to places where he doesn't know who's gonna be there
Okay.
because he's like, I'm not gonna know anyone there and I'm too shy to make friends. So that's always an issue going to new places for him.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So that's a big one. It sounds like for to know like what are some of the things that are going to make me feel a little more safe in these situations that I know I'm going to struggle. And what are the things that he is doing? Like does he try to convince you to not go to these places?
No, well, yeah, he's like, you could go, but I'll stay. Like he knows some, he has older siblings or grandparents. Like, he knows he could. That's always an option to stay home. So it's like, you could go, I'll stay.
Okay, okay. Yeah, and then that gets so hard, right? This is like classic struggle for parents of kiddos with anxiety is like knowing like, well, okay, do I kind of pick them up and put him in the car and take him to these things or you know what, this is clearly just too hard for him today. We'll try another day or we'll try another situation. Is figuring out how do you provide support so that they start to do these things and when do you kind of lay off a little bit because it is really maybe just too overwhelming. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. um, so when you are receiving this onslaught of don't make me go there or you can go, I don't need to go to that, and they're really struggling and you're like racking your brain, like that there are things that you can do and you can say, but you're feeling like maybe you're about to lose it in some way, like just it's too much for you. What are some things that you can do to kind of talk to yourself to again kind of access the tools that I know that many of you probably have on hand of like things you can do to help them, but it's just like we're getting overwhelmed in the moment maybe, and maybe upset that we're dealing with this same situation yet again. So a couple things that are not so helpful, but I understand that this is something that happens. It happens to me. Is that we might start to criticize our child in our head or maybe out loud. Why does he always do this, when it's time to get out of the house? Why can't I just, we might start to criticize ourselves. Why can't I just, like do all those things that I know, like if you've been in therapy before, or if you're just following some great parenting Instagram accounts, why can't I just do those things? Like it looks so easy. And I'm like, here I am, like, messing this up all over again. And this, again, it's not really helpful in the moment, right? So even if, let's say, circling back to, why does my child always do this? Like it's, our child is not doing these things intentionally. They could, Rebecca, if your son could probably choose to go to that birthday party and feel okay about it and feel good, he probably would choose that, but it's just so hard for him. And he's sharing that with you. And so this isn't a time to, criticize him or fault him for feeling that way. Because again, it's not his fault and it's not helpful to us in the moment to to have those kinds of thoughts. It's not going to be helpful to anybody. All right, so what could be more helpful when you're talking to yourself in these situations? um, One thing is for sure to try to harness a little bit of empathy for your child. So rather than my child is giving me a hard time or they're making this really hard, my child is having a hard time today. This is a thing that really upsets him and makes him experience strong emotions. And like, man, I'm glad that I can be there with him and support him through this. But wow, this is so hard for him. And another thing that I do in these moments when I'm trying to just like center myself a bit is try to imagine like my go-to person. Maybe it's your parenting partner, maybe it's a best friend or a family member. If you were to be sharing this in the moment with them, what are the things that that person would say to you to encourage you then, to make you feel like you've got this, like take a couple of deep breaths, you can do this, you're a great mom, you're a great dad, I know you can do this. So like picture that person in your mind and hear the kinds of words of encouragement that they would have for you and try to, bring that into your own and use that as a way to center yourself. And then this is so important and so hard because in these moments, right, it's just like we want to just get out the door to the birthday party or we want our kids to, just eat their dinner and not be worried about, are they going to throw up or are they going to get sick? We want to practice some self-compassion for ourselves. So what does that look like for each person? It can definitely vary. But some phrases that I like to keep in my back pocket is like, this feels really hard because it is hard. And this is something that I know I'm not alone in, that I know that many parents struggle with. And that can help me to just, rather than blame myself, kind of just have some empathy and compassion for myself, that this is just a hard season right now. These are hard things that we're going through. Certainly taking some deep breaths, maybe putting your hands on your heart and on your chest, on your heart and on your belly, to kind of feel your own breathing that's happening in that moment, can also be grounding and help you to just, again, kind of relax your own nervous system in that moment so that you can respond more in a more helpful way to your child. And the other thing with self-compassion is that to normalize for yourself what you're experiencing, those strong emotions that you're having, it's an actual like normal, hardwired response that we have to our children's distress. It would be weird if our kid is really struggling and you're just like, well, doesn't matter. No, like, I don't care about that. Or, like, since our kids are born, since they are newborns, we are designed, and this is a photo of when Lucas, my firstborn, was, just a couple of hours old. And, we're like hardwired to respond to our kids' distress. I remember in that period of time being so attuned to, like, is he breathing right? What's that noise? I had no idea that newborns make all kinds of funny noises. And I just think that having that compassion for yourself, that this response that you're having is normal and valid and adaptive, is really helpful. One thing to keep in mind, of course, is that, we want to ask ourselves, is our child's distress due to an actual threat, right? So are they worried about, something that is actually endangering their safety, in which case we know very well what we need to do, right? We need to do everything we can to keep our kids safe. Or is our child's distress due to a perceived threat? They're thinking that something is dangerous. They're thinking that going to the birthday party is going to be just not safe in some way, or it's going to be too much. And then in which case our response to that distress, we need to, change it a bit. It's not going to be just, hey, we're not going to go do that thing, but we're trying to figure out ways for our kid to feel more comfortable in tolerating those emotions so that they can gradually start to face that situation. All right, so we're going to shift now, but I want to take a beat for a second, because we're going to shift to what are the things that we say to our child. But I wanted to just take this moment to reflect a little bit, and I'm actually going to just stop the share for a sec so I can see you all more clearly, if whoever is available to be on camera. And just to think about some of these things that we just mentioned. What are some notes that you can jot down to yourself on paper or in the notes page on your phone to sort of remind yourself of, how can you harness in a little bit more of that empathy for your child? Who's that person that you're going to bring to mind to center yourself, to hear their words of encouragement in those difficult moments? My child gets anxious when sleeping. I'm just reading the comments here. Okay. So Benjamin, yeah, I can see how that would be really tough. If he's getting physical, especially, then that's hard, because as parents, right, number one is always safety. And so I could definitely see how that would make you anxious as well.
Yeah, I feel like I could use those, just self-compassion techniques when, I have 5 kids fighting in the same room, and then it's like just overwhelming, and I'm starting to like, I can feel my whole body tensing up and getting anxious as a parent. I wish I could say that they were feeling as anxious as me, but
Right, it's more about your own anxiety in that moment.
response to their
Yeah.
behavior or whatever it is.
Right, right. And I mean, something that's kind of out of the scope of our presentation today, but that, I'd like to just touch on for a sec is obviously, right now we're talking about kind of when we're in the thick of the storm, what are some things to do? But really, the bulk of our work, we should try to be thinking about kind of how to prevent some of these situations, right? What are things that we can do? Like if we're noticing there's a pattern of like, oh, usually they're getting in fights at this time, or I know here you mentioned like getting in his physical, getting sibling getting in his space is something that just is like almost an automatic trigger, it sounds like. So really working on that piece of like communicating that well, that when you get in a space, this is not something that's okay, and here are some ways that so here are some other choices, or here are some consequences that are going to happen if we need to bring those in. But yeah, as a parent, I can completely understand why that would make you feel anxious. Do you feel like any of these things that we talked about, like kind of just taking some deep breaths, imagining that, or in that moment, is it just kind of so over the top that it's like none of those, like, I don't know, would any of those be helpful in the moment? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. If I understood how to do the breathing techniques, I think that may, and if I was able to just like allow myself to just be okay with my anxiety just like rising and rising very fast at those moments, I think that would
Yeah.
help. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's all about practice, right? So if we only come to deep breathing in these moments of like intense distress, it's going to be hard to use those strategies because it's going to feel clunky. It's going to feel like, what am I doing? But if you are in the practice of doing some deep breathing exercises, in a follow-up email, I can shoot out some recommendations of like great meditation apps and stuff that can like walk you through that. But what I always tell parents is that if we want to use that in the like tough moments, we have to feel comfortable with it. And the only way we're going to get comfortable with it is by using those strategies in like times when our nervous system is fine, when we're feeling okay. And then we can feel more confident and like just comfortable with using some of that stuff. So I wonder if that, that could also be something that might be helpful.
Mhm. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else want to share about what they might take away or might, keep in their back pocket from the things we just reviewed? All right, we'll go ahead and keep going. Like I said, I do want to make sure I get you guys out of here at 1:30 on the dot because time is precious. So let's see. All right. So now we're going to shift gears and we're going to talk about how do you talk to your child during these periods of time. So I've kind of segmented this out into two portions during the storm, like when they're actually feeling in the throes of that really high emotion state due to anxiety. And then after the storm, what do we do once they've kind of calmed down a bit? What are some things we can say? So during the storm, this is a quote that I came across some time ago on Instagram and I just thought was fabulous, which is, if we never let children go through the full wave of emotions, when the emotion hits, there won't be the assurance that it will pass. And that is scary. So emotions themselves are never dangerous. No matter how anxious, how upset, how frustrated you're feeling, it can feel overwhelming. It will feel likely very uncomfortable, but they're not harmful to you. And so if we can really convey to our kids, like, this feels really hard, but you can handle these emotions. And now obviously there are certain behaviors that are dangerous, right? So things like hitting others, hitting themselves, like there, of course, we have to intervene in a different way. But if they're just feeling so upset, but they're not hurting anyone, they're not, being so disruptive that like, I don't know, you can't do something, right? If they're just in their fields, and like, that's okay. And that's part of that experience of riding that wave is actually valuable and showing them that I can handle those big feelings. So it's really important during the storm that we have in our mind that one of our goals is to help our child ride that wave, rather than, which again, I am guilty of this, even though I teach these things, Sometimes we just want to make the wave go away. Sometimes we want to just say like, okay, yes, I will take out that little speck from the sandwich because you're thinking that that's gonna, give you a stomach ache. Yes, I promise you that so-and-so is going to be at that birthday party, so you're going to be fine. That's kind of, we're changing the situation for them so that then now it's easier for them. But we really, over the long run, want to show them that in this situation, you are feeling all kinds of things right now. You're feeling overwhelmed, but you can do this. We can ride this wave together. Okay, so things to keep in mind during the storm also would be to validate their feelings, and doing this with words and with touch. Your kids best. If they're going to freak out that you're like trying to give them a hug in this moment, then don't try to give them a hug. But there are some kids who would appreciate that. So whether it's with words and just saying something simple like, I can see that this is so hard for you, bud. I wish it wasn't so hard. Again, touch as you see fit with your child. That is one of the most important things that we can provide in that moment of the high emotion intensity. And then any other kind of talk that's not just validating what they're going through, this is probably not the time. If they're just so intensely, dysregulated, they're not going to actually be able to process or digest that information very well in the moment. And so instead, really just honing in on the validation until we start to see that wave come down a bit. It's really what I see is most helpful to kids, just because they can't use the regular part, like kind of the prefrontal cortex, the part that's actually the more logical part of the brain where they can think through more complex things. It's just not working correctly at that time. So just write it out with them. Now, this is a big question that I get a lot from parents. Should I stay? Like if I'm feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose it. Do I need to stay there with my child, or can I just like go and step out, go to another room? I definitely had a recent situation with my kids where I was like, I'm going to go on the back deck for a few minutes, and I just stepped out into my backyard. But we can't always do that, right? And so I think the number one thing to keep in mind about whether you stay with your child during this heightened emotional experience or not is, number one, safety. Can you count on your kid being safe if you're not there? Are they going to start to hurt themselves or hurt a sibling or do something like destructive? In that case, of course, the answer is you really need to stay to ensure safety. The other thing is checking in with yourself. Can you stay sort of around and still like gradually calm your own nervous system, or do you feel like you're just escalating and you need to step out? So if things are safe and you notice that you're escalating, then that would be definitely a cue to just take a minute for yourself. And I wouldn't say, oh, tell your kid like, this is too much, I can't handle this. Just saying, mommy needs a minute by herself, I'll be right back. Or dad needs a minute by myself, I'll be right back. And just taking that time to do some of the strategies we were talking about earlier, harnessing in that self-compassion, some deep breathing, recalling that voice in your head of that supportive loved one. Okay, now we're at after the storm. Once hopefully that wave, which sometimes can take long, it's sometimes not linear. It's not like, oh, poof, now it's done. Sometimes it can be rocky before it starts to come down for good. Revisit the validation piece, right? So letting them know, I know that was really tough. And this is the time where we can start to segue into some problem solving, into coping tools. I wonder what we could do different next time. Brainstorming together, again, goes beyond the scope of this presentation, like the specifics around this. We definitely dive into a lot more of that in the coaching group that I'm starting. But I draw a ton from cognitive behavior therapy. The acronym there is CBT. So we're helping kids to understand like, where are the errors in their thinking, right? How can they start to get used to challenging their thoughts rather than just accepting their thoughts as facts? That's one big piece. And then the other big piece is identifying the small steps. No, there's no way I can go to this birthday party. There's no way I can do X thing. Whatever it is, there's always a place to start. And those are the kind of coping tools that I would suggest, you kind of start these conversations, but only again, once that storm has started to come down a bit. And you know, kids don't really like, I don't think maybe adults like it so much either, like to have a very formal, like sit down conversation. And so, you know, this doesn't have to be like, yeah, just a chat where you're not doing anything else. You can go for a walk and do this. Maybe if your kids are helping you out with a chore around the house, but you know, doing this in tandem with some kind of activity that's like doesn't require all of your attention. Like, you know, you're not going to talk about this during a movie because you're going to be trying to watch the movie. But doing something kind of low key with your child while you're talking about this can be helpful to them and allowing them to kind of let their guard down a bit and share with you more about it and brainstorm more actively. During these conversations, it's really easy to fall into a little bit of like lecturing and to like, well, look, here's some ideas that I have. And, you know, next time we're going to do it this way. But there's something that I use a lot, and in therapy, we use it a lot. That's called Socratic questioning, which is like rather than just telling your kids the answer and saying, here, these are the tools that are going to work for you. So let's start practicing them. Let's try to ask questions to help our child arrive there on their own. So, for example, like I wonder next time when we go to this birthday party, like what's something that we could do ahead of time to help that be a little bit easier, and see just what ideas they come up with. They may come up with nothing, right? So Socratic questioning is just like meeting your child where they're at. You're not giving them more information than they need, but you're trying to see where can they step in with the right, you know, with the kind of help, things that are going to be helpful to them. And if they can't, then of course you provide that to them. But trying to see what kinds of ideas they might have and making it more of like a collaboration. You're there supporting them, cheering them on, but they're the ones who are kind of leading the way. Again, you have to step in as needed because sometimes kids are like, I don't know, it's always going to be hard. It's going to be terrible. Like, and then, you know, you step in some more. And then I want to, before we shift into the next thing, just give you one concrete tool. And we cover this in a lot of depth in the coaching program. We do a lot of role playing and scripts around this, but this is one of the first tools that we introduce, which is called supportive statements. And in supportive statements, we are looking at 2 ingredients. And these are things that you can say to your kids in the moment when they're kind of starting to come down from that wave. And as sometimes you can even use a little, sprinkle some of this in during the storm. So the 2 key ingredients here are, number 1, acceptance, that validating the emotion. We've already touched on that a little bit, saying things like, I understand that this is hard. I get that you're feeling scared. Really expressing this with genuineness, with empathy. Your kid really needs to know that you get it, because if they don't think that you get it, they're going to like really dig their heels in trying to convince you that this is actually really hard. So very important to not gloss over that. The second ingredient in the supportive statement is conveying confidence in their ability to cope. So I know you can handle this. I know you'll be okay. Notice that in these statements, we're not saying like, I know you're going to have fun at the birthday party. I know you're not going to get sick when you eat that sandwich. So we're just conveying confidence in their ability to cope with the feeling. Not that we're guaranteeing any sort of outcome, but whatever feeling comes about, we're saying, I know you can handle that big feeling. And when we pair these 2 things together, this is how we get our supportive statement. So I understand how hard this is for you, and I know that you can handle it. And this tool, this specific strategy comes from something called the SPACE treatment, Supportive Parenting for Anxious Childhood Emotions. It was developed by Dr. Eli Lebowitz at Yale University. I'll touch on it a little bit more later in our conversation, but this is an evidence-based treatment, meaning there's been lots of research to show that the tools in this treatment, and this is one of them, is helpful and helps to reduce children's anxiety. All right, so we're going to do a quick practice, and then I want to again get your feedback on something. So let's practice these supportive statements because they sound easy, and I promise you in practice, sometimes even if you teach them every day, they can be a little challenging. So if we just say something like, yeah, you just got to power through, come on, let's do this, we can do it, let's go. That is conveying confidence, doing a good job of that second piece that we talked about, but it's missing something. So instead of just saying that, we want to say something like, it's hard, but you've got the power to get through this. So again, not skipping over that validation component. And let's go with another example here. If we just say, I understand this is so hard for you, and we just leave it there, we are missing something, right? We've got there the acceptance and the validation, but that's not the whole supportive statement. And that's not going to, be as helpful to our kids as if we say, instead, we want to say, I understand how hard it is for you, and I know you'll be okay. So really pairing these two, and sometimes parents start to feel sometimes like a little bit of a broken record with these. So find language that feels right to you. I am not suggesting to repeat these things ad nauseum, like again and again during their heightened emotional state. But one genuine, great supportive statement can go a really long way. So important to kind of practice this and master it. Usually we're really good at one or the other. We're either really good at conveying confidence or the acceptance. And then we kind of have to work hard on the other piece and reminding ourselves to integrate, like to put that one into play too. Okay. So I'm going to stop the screen again so I can see you all and we can kind of just touch base a little bit. All right. So thanks for letting us know, Benjamin, and we'll have the recording available later for everyone in case you want to finish watching the rest of it. So as we have now finished out this piece of what do we say to our child, both during the storm and after. What are some things that we discussed that you think you might implement, or some things that you're like, that's not going to work, and like you need some ideas? Any thoughts on that?
I think the validation is really important, at least for my son. That way, they know when you're, excuse me, but BSing through a lot of stuff. They're very, very intuitive. So validating it and saying it sincerely, I think would really help him.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I hear this in the therapy room a lot from kids where maybe their parents are saying the right words, but they're like, I don't think she really means it. Like, I don't think she really gets it. And, and then I have to kind of circle back. Have to circle back with parents and just, kind of work on that a little bit and where that's coming from. And a lot of times it's just coming from our own frustration, right? Like, gosh, why can't our kids just do this thing? We get so frustrated. And so it comes off in a way when we try these kinds of statements that are intended to be supportive, it can come off a little bit empty. So this is where, again, like taking care of ourselves and honing in on those, self-compassion and, validating your own emotions. Then once you do that, you're going to be able to show up in a much more genuine, empathic way with your supportive statements to your child. So it all builds on each other.